Mom, we went ahead and changed the locks. The message blinked on my phone while the church bus let us off under the streetlight, a halo of moths beating themselves silly against the bulb. I stood on my own porch with a paper bingo card in my purse and a roll of buttermints growing warm in my hand, and the key I'd used for 22 years refused the door like it was ashamed of me. The porch boards creaked under my shoes. The wind smelled faintly of dryer sheets from someone else's house. I didn't cry. I tucked my key back into the little zippered pocket where I keep old tokens, bus passes, the stub from the movie I saw the winter after Walt died, the broken charm from a bracelet my sister sent in 1989. I told myself, fine. Tonight the house is a stranger. Tomorrow we will be properly introduced. A moth threw itself against my cheek. I let it go. The neighbour across the street, Mr. Tally with the oxygen, waved from his recliner in the window. I waved back, smiled with my mouth, not my eyes. Then I clicked the tiny flashlight on my keychain and looked for some place that was still mine, the porch swing, the old welcome mat with the daisy that had lost a petal, my son's footprint from when he stepped in wet paint the day he was 12 and tried to help. They couldn't change those locks. The message buzzed again. We'll talk tomorrow. Don't make this hard. I set my purse down on the top step and watched the moths circle. The refrigerator inside the house would be humming like a distant thought, slow and steady. I imagined it. The bowl of apples, the chipped blue mug waiting by the sink, the blanket folded neatly on the couch arm. The life I kept tidy. I picked up the purse, crossed the street, and knocked on Mr. Tally's door. "You can sleep on my couch," he said before I asked. "It sags, but it's honest." I thanked him and stepped into air that smelled like Vicks and lemon oil. The couch did sag. It held. "Do you still have your purse?" Mr. Tally asked, like I might have left it on the porch with the mints. "Yes," I said, my hand already on the strap, protective as a mother with a small child crossing a street. There was a rustle inside, a papery breathing. My fingers found the manila envelope I'd tucked there 2 weeks ago after visiting the bank. I had stood at the safe deposit box and told the woman behind the glass, "I'm getting forgetful," though I was not. I want the deed close to my heart. She smiled the way the young do, as if I had told a quaint story. Now, under Mr. Tally's crocheted afghan, I slid the envelope open and felt the crispness of the paper that had carried our names across time. Walt's careful handwriting from years ago on a sticky note still clung to it. "Ellie, keep this where you can always find it." I had ignored his tool advice, measuring twice, cutting once, but never his paper advice. I thought of my son saying, "It's just better this way, Mum. You shouldn't worry about so many things." He said worry like a bee you could trap in a glass and slide paper underneath. He called it care. By the lamplight, I read the words that named the house as mine. The paper sounded like a bird stretching its wings. On the coffee table, between Mr. Tally's television remote and a jar of hard candies he couldn't eat anymore, lay a church bulletin. "Community Legal Aid Clinic, Wednesday afternoons," it said in small letters, as if ashamed to be helpful. I folded the bulletin into my purse, even though I knew the clinic hours by heart. Then I set the envelope back inside, under my wallet, under 2 peppermint tea bags wrapped in crinkly foil, under the roll of buttermints that had gone soft. I closed my eyes, and in that slow dark, I heard the refrigerator hum from across the street. My house breathing without me. I promised myself I would bring that breath back into my chest. 2 o'clock, Thursday. the text from an unknown number said the next morning. I'll be there with the paperwork. L. I stared at the letters and thought, Realtor. The porch boards under my feet were damp from dew when I walked home at dawn, Mr. Talley's oxygen hiss fading behind me like a whisper that had said be careful and then ran out of words. The new lock glinted stupidly, brass like a trophy a child didn't earn. I sat on the top step with my purse in my lap and called my son. He didn't answer. I called again, straight to voicemail. It's me, I said into the soft nothing. If you are selling something that belongs to me, you will want to see me. I made coffee on Mr. Talley's hot plate, stirred powdered creamer into it with the handle of a plastic spoon, and waited for the hour hand to stumble toward noon. At the senior centre, I asked for the clinic sign-up sheet. A girl with sharp eyebrows and a charitable smile slid a clipboard my way. I wrote Eleanor Hart with my best handwriting and underlined it once. Walt used to say my letters marched like soldiers, resolute and tidy. 1 o'clock, the girl said. You're on the list. Good, I said. I need to be somewhere at 2. On a corkboard by the coffee urn, a calendar hung with tiny boxes and tiny words. Someone had circled Thursday in red and written Lydia, showing 2 p.m. in a hand I didn't recognize. For a moment, I thought how ridiculous it was that ink could attempt to claim my air. I touched the circle with my fingertip, as if I could smudge it away. At 1 o'clock, a volunteer attorney with kind eyes and a tie that had seen better days took me into a room that smelled faintly of copier toner. I opened my purse like a book and turned to the page with the manila envelope. I need to make sure I am not erased, I said. They tried to make me a ghost in my own life. The attorney nodded, the way you nod at a hymn you've heard all your life but are only now listening to. Keys? The woman asked, stepping out of a white sedan with her hair cut into a sensible helmet. I had placed a folding chair on my porch and set my thermos beside it as if I were early to a parade. The afternoon light cut through the maple leaves like lace. I stood up and slipped my hands into the purse strap, feeling the weight of the envelope that could anchor a life. The woman, Lydia, I assumed, held a clipboard and a smile designed for people who didn't know what they wanted until she told them. No, I said, my voice steady in its smallness. I have something else. What I need is access, she said, as if I were an employee who had misplaced a badge. What you need, I said, is to know this house is not yours to open. She blinked. I'm here on behalf of your son. Ah, I said, a syllable that tasted like aspirin. Then you may tell him you met the deed. I slid the paper out, not like a sword, but like bread. I let her read. She squinted. She nodded, then forced her head to shake instead. Well, she said brightly, these things can be complicated. Families, you know. I do, I said, and sat back down. The porch chair complained softly under me. The maple shifted in the breeze. Somewhere across the street, a dog barked at nothing and everything. Lydia made a phone call, voice lowered, her back a polite wall. I poured myself coffee from the thermos and didn't offer her any. When she hung up, she said, "He's on his way." She said it like a threat. I heard it like a weather report, clouds gathering. "You're making this hard, Mom," my son said when he strode up the walkway, the new gold key glinting in his hand like a coin he'd won in a rigged game. "You're being unreasonable. There are sons who inherit their father's eyes, or their paper-thin patience, or the way they tie their shoes. Mine took Walt's stubborn jaw and the habit of answering the wrong question. He did not take Walt's gentleness with small, necessary things, a hinge, a hurt feeling, a plant that needed rotating to find the light. "I'm not making anything," I said, and sipped from the thermos. "I am unmaking erasure." Lydia watched us like a referee hoping for a clean match. My son smiled, practiced, pleasant. "Mum, we just wanted to simplify. We can't be worrying all the time. You've fallen twice." He said it like I had attempted a party trick and failed. "I slipped on your son's Legos," I said. "And on my own kitchen grape. Neither fall required a locksmith." His face pinched. "Don't be cute. This is serious. We spoke to a lawyer." "So did I said, and placed the deed across my lap like a sleeping cat. His eyes flickered to it. He laughed, the laugh people use when a joke isn't funny, but they need to clear a path through a conversation. "You know," he said, "I've got my own family. We can't keep being your situation." "Burden," I said. "Say the word. It's easier if we use the right keys." He swallowed. The maple clicked in the breeze. A small applause for an unknown performance. "We'll figure it out," he said, as if something were easier to handle unnamed. He put the new key back in his pocket and turned to Lydia. "Let's regroup," he murmured, and the two of them retreated like a tide that never meant to stay. "Do you want to revoke this?" the clinic lawyer asked, pointing to a copy of a durable power of attorney my son had pushed in front of me last winter, in a season when I would have signed anything presented to me alongside a pie. "Yes," I said, the word clear as cold water. I thought I needed help. I do not need to disappear. We filled in lines together in that small room with the copier smell, the lawyer and I, two people who believed ink could also be mercy. I initialed every corner as if I were planting flags on a map. I learned the old-fashioned word notary had not been retired. A woman with reading glasses on a chain wrote her name slowly and pressed a seal that left a raised circle. I wanted to run my finger over again and again. The clinic gave me a list of phone numbers and a little plastic sleeve for the new, important paper, like a raincoat for a small saint. On the bus back through town, I looked out at the familiar, ordinary blocks, liquor store, daycare, the big oak that had split during the last storm and still looked like a wound, and felt the bus seat shiver under me as we hit a pothole. I pressed my palm to the window and left a fog print that vanished as soon as I made it. My phone buzzed in my lap. "We'll talk later," my son wrote. "We'll make a plan." I typed and deleted again. In the end, I put the phone face down on my thigh and watched my reflection in the glass. My mother had the same small, stubborn mouth. She used to say, "If they take you for granted, take yourself away." I pressed the stop chord. "Requesting stop," the recorded voice said, calm as bread rising. "Try the frog," Walt had told me once, long before he died, when I locked myself out and stood in my robe on the porch like a cloud that had lost its sky. There is still a cast concrete frog by our front steps, its mouth a grin only children and widows trust. I knelt, breath catching, and lifted it. The soil underneath was damp and smelled like dark pennies. No key, of course. A divot where something used to be. I set the frog back in its place and sat on the step, legs aching in their honest way. It hurt, and the hurt was precise. I thought of Walt's tool bench with its shadow board, each hammer and wrench hung where its shape fit like a portrait. People who put things back where they belong are never prepared for someone who believes belonging is negotiable. "Hey," Mr. Talley called from across the street, lifting a hand with the twined tubes under his nose. "You okay?" I lifted my hand in reply. "I'm here," I called back. It was both an answer and a promise. An hour later, a sheriff's deputy arrived because a volunteer at the clinic had called for a civil standby when I mentioned the lock. The deputy wore a tired face and decent boots. He listened as I explained and nodded at the papers kindly, the way some men nod at babies. "We can make sure you get essential items," he said. "Then we'll talk next steps." "I need photographs," I said, "and my green cardigan. And the small blue tin with the seashell on it." He wrote it down like I might change my mind and ask for a piano. "Ma'am, we're going inside," the deputy said, and my son scowled as if someone had tracked mud on his day. He had the decency to step back. Decency is not the same as kindness. I slipped past him into the house. The refrigerator hummed as predicted, warm as a body. I opened it and saw exactly 6 apples, each with a brown sunspot growing. My blue mug waited by the sink, handle turned toward me like a small bow. On the couch arm lay the folded blanket, the one with the faint coffee stain from the morning the news told me Walt's test results had changed everything. I put the mug in my purse and the blanket on my shoulders, closed my eyes for an uneven breath. The deputy moved through the rooms with me like a careful tide, taking pictures with his phone. "If there are documents," he said, and I handed him the forged-looking list on the kitchen table titled Pre-Listing Repairs. Next to it, a work order with an estimate circled in highlighter. Someone had taken my loose pens and put them all in a cup I didn't recognize. It felt like an accusation. In the bedroom, my dresser drawers had been organized poorly, socks folded into squares that held no memory of my feet. I found the blue tin with the seashell in the closet on the highest shelf, as if it had been placed there by someone tall who didn't know it wasn't his to move. Inside, the first tooth my son lost, wrapped in tissue like contraband. A Polaroid of me and Walt at a picnic table with paper plates and an unfortunate potato salad. A scrap of fabric from my mother's dress. I put the tin back and closed the closet door softly. Not everything needs to be carried to be kept. On the way out, I paused at the hallway mirror. My face looked like itself. The deputy nodded at me from the doorway as if confirming I existed. "We'll be in touch," he said. The words sounded like coat hooks on a wall. I needed something to hang on them. I had an idea. "Hold it there," I told my hands, and they stilled as I snapped a picture of a document that said I had signed to list my house. The signature was my name's shape, but not its soul. They had tried to imitate my slant and failed. It leaned like a fence in bad weather. I took photos of everything: the work order estimate, the sheet that detailed staging suggestions, including remove personal clutter and neutralize feminine touches. I photographed my own refrigerator because it felt faithful, and the window over the sink where a streak of detergent had dried and left a small, crystal wave. Evidence and affection became the same motion: lift, frame, press. On the stove, someone had set a timer and forgotten it. It blinked 0 like a dare. I pressed the button to make it stop blinking. In the quiet, the house sighed. "Mum?" my son said from the doorway, softer now, like he remembered a time the word had been a home. "Can we talk about what's best?" "For whom?" I asked, without turning around. I licked my thumb and rubbed at a spot on the counter I'd missed, the way I used to clean toothpaste off his bathroom sink after he left for school. What's best for whom? He didn't answer. There are silences that are merciful. This one was not. Dear Andrew, I wrote at Mr. Talley's kitchen table that night, the lamp making a golden circle that felt like a blessing I could give myself. I wrote slowly, in marching letters, as if I were showing my pen where to go and it had all day to get there. I did not ask for apology. I did not list the nights with fevers or the field trips paid for with jewelry I didn't miss until I did. I did not say, I carried you, because he knew that. Every mother knows the mathematics of carrying. I wrote, I am not a suitcase to be checked or stored. I am not a wall to be moved. This house is mine until I decide it isn't. If you need a place to store your fear about time and money, find a banker or a therapist. I am your mother, not your storage unit. I folded the letter and put it in an envelope without a stamp. And in the morning, I walked across the street and slid it through the mail slot that had fed us catalogues and electric bills and postcards for 2 decades. The slot made a soft, clean sound. I didn't wait for his car in the driveway or his feet on the porch. I turned and walked toward the bus stop. At the shelter where the clinic lady told me I could get a lockbox for free, a woman named Alma showed me how to set the code. Choose something you won't forget, she said, not looking at me like I was fragile. Choose yourself. I chose the year my mother taught me to ride a bicycle, her hand a warm engine at my back. Are you the Eleanor with the maple? A woman asked in the diner, hovering by my booth with a cautious smile. I'm Ruby. I used to teach 8th grade math. Now I sell houses for people who still count. I looked up from my eggs and saw a face that wasn't armored. Sit, I said, and she did. She ordered coffee and told the waitress no sugar, then changed her mind and asked for 1 packet because sometimes it's good to be sweet to yourself. I liked her before she said anything about percentages. Keep it or sell it, Ruby said, honest as a ruler. Either way, you call the shot. No relatives, not even the nice ones. What would you do? I asked, surprising myself, because for months I had not asked any questions that weren't already answered for me by people with plans. Ruby blew on her coffee. I would think about where I sleep best, she said. Everything else feels like numbers, pretending to be weather. I slept that night on Mr. Talley's couch again. The sag had become a cradle. In the morning, I called Ruby. We'll sell, I said, but not to erase me, to let me move myself. She said, I understand, and I believed her. At my kitchen table with the maple making lace on the floor, we filled out papers that looked like the ones Lydia had carried, but smelled like fresh ink. I read every line, moving my lips, like a girl learning a poem by heart. We chose a photographer who took pictures of rooms the way my mother used to take pictures of babies, softly, without flash. We wrote a paragraph that said, this house was cared for, a paragraph that did not say by whom, because that didn't change the care. Keep, I said, touching the chipped blue mug. Let go, I said, placing the bunt pan that had never learned my hands. I made 2 boxes from grocery store cast-offs, wrote the words in black marker that smelled like a classroom, and tried not to explain my choices to the air. I kept the quilt my sister sewed from old dresses, the snow globe of a town that was never ours, but had a bench like the one where Walt proposed, the photograph of Andrew at 6 in rain boots that came up to his knees, grinning as if mud were heaven. I let go. The juicer that made everything taste like the inside of a lawn, the second set of guest sheets that no one had asked to sleep on in a long time, the little ceramic rooster that my mother loved, and I did not. Every so often I'd find a note in my own handwriting, stuck to the back of a drawer. Call dentist, check smoke alarm batteries, buy stamps. I did one of those things and crossed it out, felt a victory out of proportion to the task. The house looked back at me, emptier, and did not accuse. The maple flickered at the window, green like a mercy. Ruby came by with stickers for the estate sale. "You can set any price you want," she said, "or write, 'Make an offer.' People surprise you." I put "Nonso" on a stack of children's books and hoped for a mother with tired eyes. I put an 20 on the mirror that made me tell the truth. I put "Not for sale" on the blue tin with the seashell and put it on top of everything else, so I could see it between goodbye and next. "Sign here," the closing agent said, sliding paper after paper toward me like a deck of cards she shuffled for a magic trick that was only math. I signed. I initialed. I dated. The room smelled like carpet cleaner and coffee. My pen left my name in places my feet had already walked. Ruby smiled at me, as if we were both finishing a long, patient hike. "Funds will wire this afternoon," the agent said. "You'll see them before dinner." "Before dinner," I repeated, the words tasting like soup. I remembered my mother's kitchen timer, shaped like a lemon, ticking the same rhythm for boiling eggs, for timing overdue calls, for praying too long over a decision. Somewhere in town, a kitchen timer was blinking 0.6 hours again. In this office, the wall clock moved, dispassionate as a judge. At home, or what had been home, I walked one last time through the rooms. The estate sale had emptied them of everything that chose to leave me without complaint. In the corner of the living room, the outline on the wall where a picture had hung looked like a ghost that wasn't haunting, but waiting politely for the next family to claim an angle of light. I wrote a check to the clinic that had printed the revocation papers for me, and another to the shelter where Alma had shown me how to set a code. In the memo line of both, I wrote, "For the someone who will need this after me." I put the checks in envelopes and licked each seal as if sealing a promise. When the email came saying the funds had landed, I put my hand on my chest and felt the same relief I felt the first time Andrew slept through the night. A quiet, exhausted hallelujah. "Second floor, end of the hall," the apartment manager had said. "It's small, but the windows are stubborn about light." I liked her for saying stubborn. I moved in with the box labelled Keep and the one labelled Let Go, and a plant that had never thrived in the house but seemed to perk up as soon as we rode the elevator. The new apartment had a view of the bus stop and a laundromat where the dryers clicked like distant applause. At night, the upstairs toddler ran in glorious, sticky circles, her feet a tiny drumline. Between her noon joy and her 8 p.m. exhaustion, there were hours of quiet so gentle I could hear my own teeth settle after a long day. On Thursdays, I took my old bingo bag, a joke now, a badge, and brewed tea in the little kitchen. 3 women from the senior centre came to sit on chairs that didn't match and tell the truth. Alma came once and left with a plate of store-bought cookies and my phone number. Ruby came and brought honey in a jar shaped like a bear. Mr. Talley sent a plant cutting and a note on an index card that said, "This couch doesn't sag yet, but give it time." I hung a picture of the maple tree on the wall. In the photograph, it looked like a tent that had chosen not to move. I stood underneath it with a paper cup of lemonade in my hand, and the house beside it looked proud of how ordinary it was. I was proud too, and not embarrassed by pride. One morning I woke before dawn and listened to the refrigerator hum in a frequency I recognized. I made a slice of toast and buttered it as if butter were prayer. The sky turned from navy to the color of a faded church bulletin. I stood at the window and watched the first bus kneel to let a woman on with a cart. Kneeling is not always surrender. Sometimes it is welcome. Mom? The voice came through the new door like a memory that hadn't been invited. I opened it because I was raised to open doors. Andrew stood in the hallway with his hands in his pockets and a hard, hopeful look on his face. The kind men wear when they're about to ask for something they called unnecessary yesterday. He glanced past me at the modest couch, the little table, the plant that had decided to live. He looked back at me. I heard you sold the house, he said. It wasn't a question. I heard you. He stopped, the words snagging on his teeth. I did, I said. I didn't step aside. The hall smelled faintly of laundry and someone's fish dinner. The light over the exit sign made an honest halo. He swallowed. We've had some unexpected expenses. You know how it is. He smiled like Lydia's clipboard. Maybe we could. I held up my hand. He looked at it as if it were a stop sign or a blessing. They are sometimes the same. I sent 2 checks today, I said. One to the people who help women when men change the locks. One to the people who teach those women how to open other doors. He blinked. You're really doing this? He said it like a diagnosis. I nodded. I'm really living, I said, and felt the truth of it in my knees, in my hands, in the way my shoulders didn't lift like shields anymore. Will you help us? He asked. And there was a boy in the man, a rainy day and a bowl of soup. I loved that boy and set him down gently. I will listen, I said. I will not be used. The first is grace. The second is boundary. They share a fence, but not a door. He stared at me and then at his shoes. The hallway held its breath. I did not fill the silence for him. He nodded once, a man who had received something unexpected. Not money, not permission, not punishment, but a line he could see, drawn with care, straight as my lettering. Okay, he said finally. He almost smiled. Then he didn't. Okay. He turned and walked down the hall, his shoulders heavy with things I could not carry without disappearing. I watched him go, and felt the old ache and the new calm, like 2 birds on the same wire, balancing. I closed the door. It clicked the way a thing clicks when it is exactly where it belongs. I leaned my forehead against it for a moment, like pressing a stamp onto an envelope. The apartment was quiet around me, a kind quiet that sat beside me like a friend who knows when not to speak. On the counter, next to the plant cut from Mr. Talley's, lay the small lockbox Alma had given me. I turned it in my hands. The code was the year my mother's hand took off from my back, and I rode forward on my own, a wobble, and then a certainty. I pressed the numbers. The box opened. Inside was the deed, not because I needed it, but because I liked the sound of paper breathing near me. I slid the deed out just enough to touch its edge, then slid it back. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere upstairs, the toddler laughed in her sleep. The bus outside sighed at the curb and took someone away and brought someone back. I sat on my little couch and folded the blanket over my knees, not because I was cold, but because it was mine. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. The silence wasn't painful, not anymore. It just sat beside me, like a friend who knows when not to speak. And when the doorbell rang, not now, not again, I smiled, because it was only the neighbour with a pie pan and a question about the laundry room schedule. And there, on the wall by the peephole, was the tiny metal plate where a chain could go if I ever needed one. I didn't, tonight. Tonight, the only lock I changed was the one inside my chest, turning softly, finally, toward myself.